Welcome back, everybody. Today I am bringing you the first part of my official 2021 running back rankings. Going to be touching on running back 1 through running back 6 today. I know I dropped my way too early rankings all the way back in March. A lot has changed over the last 5.5 months in the NFL that has drastically impacted both the actual league and fantasy football. So I'm going to waste no time. We're going to jump right in here. Just a quick note before I get to number 1, all of these rankings are for half PPR. I play in predominantly full PPR formats, but I figured it's the best compromise. On to number 1, as if there was any surprise as to who this was going to be, it is Christian McCaffrey. Despite having an injury-riddled 2020, CMC has to be the running back 1 moving into next year. It simply isn't even a contest. When he played last year, he was about as elite as you could possibly be at the running back position. He finished as the RB53, but was the RB1 in points per game, with 27.3 for half PPR, which is 5 full points higher than the running back 2. That's an insane difference. Christian McCaffrey is literally head and shoulders above the RB2. That's like the gap between the RB2 and the RB14, if I had to guess right now. He is such an incredible advantage when he plays, and I have no concerns about his long-term health moving into this season. He is absolutely incredible. Going back to 2019, he averaged 25.8 points per game. So last year he was looking like he was on pace to demolish that season's pace as well. It was absolutely nuts. Like I said, there's nothing to really show that he doesn't deserve to be the RB1 when healthy. So he's going to hold this spot. I think putting anybody else here is trying to get too cute for clicks and views. I'm not about that. We're keeping it simple. We're keeping it easy. Christian McCaffrey is the number 1 overall running back in fantasy football. Having a quick tier break from 1 to 2, my RB2 for this year is Dalvin Cook. I have 2 through 4, very close, probably even 2 through 5 to be quite honest with you, but right now it is Dalvin Cook. For 1, I think he has the least external worries out of anybody from 2 through 5, although the injury concern is still there. The past 2 years he has played 14 games, and I know you want 16 games from your first round pick, but I think he's so good in that time period that you're willing to let those 2 or 3 games he misses per year slide. I am mildly concerned that he's had pretty serious-ish injuries in both shoulders, so if either of those get hurt again, there's a very decent chance he misses more than just 2 games. It could be looking more like 5 to 6, which is definitely not something you want, but so far, knock on wood, everything seems alright with him. This past year, he was the RB3, even in 14 games, and the RB2 in points per game. He was second in the league in targets for running backs, and he was the only running back to get over 250 carries and 50 targets. So he's a very unique player in terms of the volume he gets both on the ground and through the air. He managed to produce at such a high level with the 42nd run blocking efficiency in the entire league, and likely will continue to do so because the Vikings did make some adjustments to their offensive line. I believe they brought in Christian Darrisaw, but it really hasn't changed that much. It's still probably going to be a below average unit if we're being honest. The offense was passed down from Gary Kubiak to his son Clint, so there's not going to be any real change in the system. This is going to be one that continues to funnel the ball to Dalvin Cook both through the air and on the ground and rely on the ground game as they have done over the past few years. This past year, he had 17 total touchdowns. Only 1 was through the air, although it felt like he was busting screens for 30 yards at least once a game. And I think we're going to see more touchdowns through the air as they continue to feed him the ball, and that's part of the game. I think it's only inevitable that he eventually regresses back to his norm and scores like 3 or 4 touchdowns through the air. Given who else is in the top 3 outside of Christian McCaffrey, I think he is the least red flaggy running back here, given his proven production and consistency, despite the fact that he's probably going to miss you a few games this year when you take him. So my running back 2 this year is Dalvin Cook. Moving on to my RB3, and we're going to break into one of my biggest movers from my early rankings to my current rankings, and that is Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara has given me nothing but headaches this offseason when it comes to figuring out how exactly I want to rank him. If you didn't see my early running back rankings, I'm going to break down for you why exactly I had Alvin Kamara as my RB9. This was made with the impression that Drew Brees was retiring and Taysom Hill was likely to be the Saints QB. One of those definitely came true, and who knows about the other one. I would not be shocked if the Saints roll out a quarterback by committee. This past year, Alvin Kamara was the RB1 overall. He's been a top 5 running back in 4 out of the past 5 years, with 2019 being an RB12 finish due to lingering injuries. Still respectable, but not something you expect when you take a running back in the top 5. When he's healthy, we do know what he can do, and I don't doubt his health moving forward. those injuries, his little knee mess up, that was in the past. He didn't show any signs that was past year with how good of a performance he put up. 1,700 yards from scrimmage, 21 total touchdowns, a fat 22.4 points per game. He's an absolute killer with a proven track record with Drew Brees. This past year, though, when Brees went down, we got a taste of life with Taysom Hill, and it was absolutely miserable. His points per game in half PPR dropped from 25.91 to 12.95. That is a 50% decrease. That's absolutely nuts. His reception averages dropped from 6.6 to 2.5 with 0 receiving touchdowns. His targets dropped from 8.3 to 4, and his receiving yard averages fell from 64 yards a game to 12.8. His rushing attempts, however, stayed basically the same as did yards, and his rushing touchdown average dropped from 19 over a full Brees season to 12 with Hill, because Taysom Hill does like to sap some of those goal line targets away from everybody else that he plays with. Over a full season with Hill at those paces, he would have had 207 half PPR fantasy points on the year, which would place him as the RB9 during an incredibly down year for running backs. Obviously, it's difficult to assume health, but guys like Chubb, Saquon, CMC, Ekeler, and not Miles Sanders. I had Miles Sanders in my notes, but Miles Sanders isn't fucking outscoring anybody. That dude sucks. Either way, those 3-4 players get healthy, maybe some more ahead of him miss. He was very likely on that cusp of an RB2, to be quite honest. But even with that concern, a massive hole has opened up in this offense due to the injury to Michael Thomas. And despite the fact that part of me really still wants to rank Alvin Kamara lower because of the uncertainty that surrounds Taysom Hill being the quarterback of this offense, even with Winston, I'm still mildly concerned, although I'm far less concerned because Winston's actually kind of a quarterback. Michael Thomas being gone opens up an absolute lion's share of targets for Kamara to take. Why do I say only Kamara? Because nobody else on this offense is even that good. Traquan Smith sucks. Marquez Callaway's a dude I've never heard of. He sounds like you made him in Madden to throw in your franchise to fill the 53rd spot on your roster. I don't even know who their tight end is. I think it's Troutman. That dude has one highlight in his entire career, and everyone keeps playing it on Twitter. It's that zig route that he ran against, like the Chiefs or something. The dude sucks. He's not that good. All of these guys that are left outside of Alvin Kamara are just dudes who can catch a football and need to be on the roster because the Saints can't roll out 0 receivers every week. Michael Thomas's injury vacates an insane amount of targets. It only would have come out to 55 this past year due to the injury, but in prior years it was 186, 147, and 149. That's not even taking into account the loss of other guys like Jared Cook and Emmanuel Sanders dating back a few years, which would open up even more targets that nobody has been brought in to take up. Ty Montgomery's taken like 6 targets before he dies and goes back to running back. And Devonta Freeman's half dead as it is. The Saints offense is literally just Alvin Kamara at this point. He had 107 targets this past year without Michael Thomas for most of the year. Think about that throughout the rest of his years, 2019, 2018, 2017. He was hovering right around 100, so really not too much of a major increase. Probably gets canceled out due to the Taysom Hill games. But you have to think with that many targets being gone and nobody else being good enough to deserve those targets, you can realistically see a path to 135, 140 targets for Alvin Kamara. Even if the quarterback is Taysom Hill and that touchdown upside is greatly reduced once you get inside the 20, and maybe he doesn't run the ball as well, even though the stats kind of show that he was the same on that. When you have a running back who can offer you that type of receiving upside, he's basically a wide receiver 1 at that point. You look at guys like Calvin Ridley, DeAndre Hopkins, Stephon Diggs, Keenan Allen. Those are guys you want to bring you 130, 140 targets. And you're going to get that from a running back who also adds something on the ground. I think that type of upside is undeniable, and I have to put him at RB3 above a guy like Derrick Henry just because of that. It's kind of painful because I'm very aware how heavily this can backfire if Taysom Hill makes no improvements and is the quarterback and continues to avoid him in the passing game. But when there's a chance for Alvin Kamara to get 30 to 40 more targets in this season, it's almost disrespectful to not move him up this high in the rankings. So my RB3 for 2021 is Alvin Kamara. Moving on to my RB4, I have a lot less to say about him than I did Alvin Kamara. It is Derrick Henry. Somehow he rushed for 2,000 yards last year, and nobody really cares. He just continues to do his thing. He's aging like a fine wine, Derrick Henry. He finishes the RB2 this year. Despite being an absolute non-factor through the air with 19 receptions, he was also the RB3 in points per game. One of these years, Derrick Henry is going to take a step back, but I'm not going to bet on it being this year and I probably won't bet on it being next year either. I'm just going to keep putting him this high until the wheels absolutely fall off, and then, oh well, I take that one on the chin. He had 17 touchdowns this year, which is actually a slight decrease from 18 his previous year. So one, there's no scoring issues, and two, maybe the decline is on the way. If he gets 16 this year, keep an eye out. There could be some red flags like the loss of Arthur Smith, but I'm not worried about that just yet, especially when you bring in a guy like Julio Jones who helps open up this offense. A.J. Brown is a killer alpha receiver, but when you bring in a second option like Julio Jones, who when healthy is still a top 6 receiver in the NFL, you have to pretty much force defenses to make a choice. Do you want to cover the 2 elite physical freaks on the outside of the field, or try to stop the one inside the box and put 8 when you get cooked over the top? It's a very hard decision to make, and I think it's one that will make life a lot easier for Derrick Henry. In terms of individual stats, he led the league in breakaway runs, evaded tackles, he was 8th in juke rate, he led in carries, he was 2nd in red zone touches, and he was 1st in yards created, which were generated by the runner after the first evaded tackle with 997. He had almost 1,000 yards purely after the first tackle attempt. The only reason that I have him this low, below Dalvin Cook and Alvin Kamara, is that, like I said at the start, he rushed for over 2,000 yards and was still only the RB3 in points per game. He needs to have another historic season to come close to finishing as the RB1. But with the health of guys like Christian McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara, looking like it's going to be okay as of right now, obviously you can't predict this, he just doesn't have the potential to be RB1 unless he puts up like 2,400 rushing yards on the ground and like 20 touchdowns. And that's just not necessarily a bet I'm comfortable taking. Derrick Henry is going to be a great running back one who's going to provide you value, especially in that back end of the season when he really kicks up. But I don't think he has the RB1 overall upside that you might be looking for in a guy who you take in the first round at running back. Still though, elite producer, you know what you're going to get, even if that passing game work is incredibly limited, if not non-existent most weeks. Derrick Henry is my running back 4. Moving on to my RB5, and a guy I wish I had the balls to put over Derrick Henry, but I just don't think I do. We have Austin Ekeler. I made a video a while back saying how I think he was a top 3 running back. My opinion has changed, but ever so slightly. I think he's still a top 5 option. He would have been top 4 if Alvin Kamara didn't just kind of benefit from the absence of one of the best target hog receivers in the game, and Michael Thomas. But here we are. Austin Ekeler is still ranked top 5 for me. I think the red zone targets and loss of Lynn are a slight drop given Lynn's tendency to feed the hell out of a workhorse running back, like we saw with Melvin Gordon before Ekeler, and then when Ekeler got hurt. It's a reason I'm kind of high on DeAndre Swift this year. But I was looking more into the red zone stuff, and Ekeler was never really a big red zone guy. He was pretty solidly in like the mid to low 30s for red zone targets and rushes, and it didn't stop him from having an RB4 finish, I believe, in 2019. My love for Ekeler's tool threat abilities, as I've said, are well stated. I'd recommend you go watch my player profile on him if you want a more complete picture, but I will still do my best to detail it here. In his full games with Justin Herbert, he was the RB7 on the year in points per game. He managed to have the 5th most receiving yards for a running back, despite only playing in 10 games. That's an incredible number, and that only begins to highlight his receiving upside. He was on pace for 1,800 total yards, 100 receptions, 3 tutties, and 202 carries. These are numbers that are taken from his averages with Herbert, averaged up into a week-by-week basis, then multiplied by 16. Obviously, extrapolation isn't the strongest art, but it is one to help you get a sense of what you are working with. He played in an offense that ran the 2nd most plays in the league, was 2nd in the league in running back targets, even when Ekeler wasn't there, and they were 8th in the league in yards. Freeing him from Anthony Lynn and Shane Steichen will open back up his route tree and let him utilize his full abilities as a route runner. He's incredibly good as a route runner, but you might have forgotten last year because Anthony Lynn and Shane Steichen had their thumbs up their ass the whole year and didn't let them do anything. But in terms of that route running, you also get those dump-offs and screens that benefit running backs so much that Herbert loved to target him with last year. He actually received more targets per full game with Justin Herbert than he did Phillip Rivers. How much of that is an indictment on Lynn? Who knows, but it sure as hell says something about his chemistry with Justin Herbert. Given Phillip Rivers' reputation for being the check-down king for running backs, it kind of propelled them to elite fantasy seasons. It's what helped Austin Ekeler have such a great season. It's what helped Melvin Gordon. Maybe it wasn't Lynn that loved the running back so much, although I'm sure he played a part in it. Maybe it was the quarterback. And you know what's better than a quarterback who targets running back like 9 times a game? Someone who targets him 10.5 times a game like Justin Herbert did. It was absolutely incredible. He was also second on his team in targets per game with 8. Like I said, I'm going to keep it kind of brief here, but I highly recommend you go watch my Austin Ekeler player profile for more on him. Not to mention they also greatly improved the coaching staff. Joe Lombardi came in, going to be play calling, worked with the Saints, had a guy called Alvin Kamara on his team, and you saw how he was utilized. Not to mention the additions of Corey Linsley, probably the best center in football. Rashawn Slater, who was held by many as a top 2 tackle prospect, if not top 1. And they brought in another guard piece, I believe, Matt Filer, who can just be a swingman and fill in the spots when Brian Bulaga inevitably misses 8 weeks. My RB5 kept it a little brief, Austin Ekeler. Concluding my video for today, we have my RB6, another jumper who jumped actually the same amount of spots as Alvin Kamara, sliding up from my RB12 to my RB6. We have Aaron Jones. He finished at 12 in March, and he, like I said, has seen quite the jump. The main reasons for this, he re-signed in Green Bay, and Aaron Rodgers is back for at least 1 more year. Good thing this is redraft, not dynasty, because I do not care about the implications of Aaron Rodgers leaving in 2022. Why? It's 2021. I do not care just yet. Even with the loss of Corey Linsley, that kind of sucks. I don't see this being too great of a loss. I still think he will keep up his pace. He has only missed 2 games the past 2 years, both for this past year, and he still managed to finish as the RB5 in both overall scoring and points per game. He was the RB2 in 2019, finishing as the RB4 in points per game. He brings you a high ceiling and elite upside. The floor is also not that bad either. He scored 19 touchdowns in 2019, only 11 in 2020, but still gave you that high-level top 5 finish. But that scoring upside is always there for him to rattle off 4 touchdowns in a week, whether it be through a deep wheel route or him breaking off 2 or 3 long runs. He's always going to have that potential to blow up for 40 every week he's in your lineup. In 2020, he was 9th in targets and 10th in carries for running backs. In 2019, he was 15th in carries and 11th in targets. He still produces and gives you upside both on the ground and through the air. I would like to see him utilized a little bit more under Matt LaFleur, but he's still had him get pretty good finishes in fantasy, so I can't complain too much. He's just such a hyper-efficient, excellent runner. He's such a bitch to take down. It's incredible. He's super strong. He gives you plenty of red zone opportunities as well, ranking around the top 10 in both targets and carries for both 2020 and 2019. And not to mention his track record. He's finished top 5 the past 2 years, so he is a proven elite producer. There's nothing to really question here. I had him so low before because of the uncertainty, but I don't think there's anything about Aaron Jones at this point that we don't know that would cause him to be outside of the top 6, top 8, other than liking guys more. But how can you like... That's a stupid question. I know how you can like other guys more. But when a guy shows you that he can do it consistently, you have to give him the respect he deserves. After the first year, sure, you can think it was a fluke. After 2 years, not so much. I don't think so. I think Aaron Jones is legit. I think he's here to stay. And I think he's going to give you another elite finish in fantasy and still give you that weekly RB1 upside that not a lot of other guys bring, because he can bring you receiving work, he can bring you the groundwork, he can bring you 4 touchdowns any given week. Sorry for the disrespect, Mr. Jones, on the past ranking. I hope you can forgive me as you round out my top 6. So to wrap up my top 6 running backs for 2021, RB1 is Christian McCaffrey, RB2 is Dalvin Cook, RB3 is Alvin Kamara, RB4 Derrick Henry, RB5 Austin Ekeler, and RB6 Aaron Jones. If you enjoyed, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Tell me what I can do better. Running back 7 through 12, like I said, should be coming out within the next day or so. Just have to go back and tidy through those rankings again. Bears, you're going to see a lot more of the names you're used to, specifically one guy who you're probably questioning why I left him off this list, but trust me, I can explain. Good to be back. Hope you enjoy the content, guys. Peace out.